So the fourth industrial revolution is upon us. It's no longer a buzzword, occasionally heard in the closed door corporate headquarters, but is becoming a true reality in modern factories and shop floors. Robots, sensors, and automation actually are not new for the high tech manufacturing or even energy and utilities industry. So, what exactly is Industry 4.0 and how can technology help drive sustainability? Welcome everyone to this panel discussion. Over the next 45 minutes, we will try to answer some of these questions and learn more about the building block of fourth industrial revolution. We have a very interesting panel today. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. Starting with Unni. So Unni has about 30 years of experience in manufacturing industry. He has ran and scaled businesses in Malaysia, Singapore, and now CEO and co-founder of a disruptive startup, DBiz. He's also been a president of Malaysian Biodiesel Association, a gold medalist from NUS Singapore, and also an Harvard alum. Welcome, Unni.
Thank you.
Amit is a partner and managing director at BCG Digital Ventures UK. Amit has worked with companies like Microsoft, Nokia, McKinsey in different parts of the world, Harvard MBA, and an IIT KGP alum. And third on the panel, we have Kapil. Kapil is CEO and co-founder of Intelligence, where has presence in US, UK, France, Switzerland, and rapidly expanding across all over the globe. Kapil holds a number of patents under his belt, a graduate from IIT Delhi, and also an MBA from London Business School. So we've divided this panel discussion into four broad themes, and I would request the audience to send their questions throughout the session. We just want to make this session as interactive as possible. So kicking off with the first theme, Unni, you have worked in manufacturing industry, starting with Unilever, and you went on to build a multi-million-dollar palm oil business. What drove you to entrepreneurship?
Thank you, Nitin, for that introduction. Very happy to be here with my fellow panelists. All my career has always been trying to do something new. I'm basically a chemical engineer, always trying to identify some gaps in the market and create new products that we can differentiate. Over a period of time, as I built a business from scratch to about $200 million, specializing in real process industries. One of the things that we always grapple with in the agri-business in Asia is the issue about sustainability. And so, palm oil, the industry that I worked for a good part of my career, has always been on the wrong side for the wrong reasons, being accused of deforestation, loss of biodiversity, killing of wildlife, and a sort of a tarnished image for a very useful and important crop. But I saw that there is a huge opportunity where technology can play a part in trying to improve sustainability credentials and authentication as we would need in supply chains. So that was one of the biggest motivating factors for me to get involved in a space where I had very deep domain expertise of, but trying to combine technology to create a solution that hopefully we can discuss a bit more during this panel.
Right. Well, thanks, Unni. Thanks. I'm sure your journey would inspire many others out there. So, Kapil, you started WIN about 9 years ago, and you successfully scaled this business to multiple countries now. So I would like to understand from you, what has been your mantra to stay put and stay long in current age where people do not tend to even stay in a job for more than 2 years?
I think I'm going to echo what Unni said. I think we all have a bug to try new things and keep doing things better. But thanks for inviting us on the panel, Nitin. And the three things that come to mind, which have kept me going and the company going. The first one is a purpose, right? So a lot of people start with a business aim, which is important. But I think purpose transcends many business outcomes and objectives. And for us, we'd all been in corporate life. A few of us got together. And early days, we said, no, we're going to do this because we want to make life simpler and better for field workers out there. There are 2.5 billion deskless workers. Unni is working about agri. That's, I think, the biggest chunk, 700 million, 900 million deskless workers out there. Their life is already very different. If you look at the desk-based working space. I think that's moved very well and very fast. But if you look at the world of the field, life is hard, and we wanted to simplify that life so that people can actually spend more time, more quality time with their health, with their friends and their family. And we would do that by making their life simpler, giving them better productivity tools, right? But that purpose of you got to focus on your health, you got to focus on your friends, you got to have a good life, really kept us going. And as COVID hit everybody, I think you can see that some of those values start to come back, and you actually start to design systems with that thinking. So we started almost 9 years ago, and our core focus was let's make the whole data capture thing very, very human. So we use short videos to capture data, which everybody can do. Everybody can make a video today, but at that time there was no TikTok, nothing. But it's also a testament that we stuck to our purpose, and we're today delivering on that commitment. The second thing is the team. I think it's very important to have a team that shares that purpose and can be committed to the same goal. And the third one is more business. You play for outcomes, not for output, right? So we are an AI data company, and the whole 2000 to 2020, the kind of Y2K to digital area has been output, whereas we were like, no, let's get the outcomes going, and that then doesn't distinguish you from you're a big company or are you a small SaaS vendor who can make a disruption. I think those are the three that come to mind.
Well, thanks, Kapil. That makes sense, actually. Passion and purpose with an addressable market certainly keeps you going, and staying focused and long-term thinking are indeed very difficult skills to master. Thanks, Kapil, for that. So, Amit, you've scaled and had a successful exit recently from MachineMax, and your previous venture, Coup, was in a slightly different space, kind of an edtech and consumer space. So, how do you overcome this inertia and find the next big, the new idea, and are able to rapidly scale ventures, especially in the last few years? What has been your secret of finding an idea, going behind it, and quickly scaling it at pace?
Thanks, Nitin, for the question, and thanks also for inviting to this panel. It's a brilliant question, and I've done a few startups. MachineMax was my third startup, and I've done in 3 different areas: fashion tech, parent tech, construction tech. They have had different levels of outcomes, right? From utter failure, and one of them was like a complete disaster, to a good result last time when we sold to Shell. I think as you look at different ideas over a period of time, I've learned that you really need to look at it from 3 lenses, right? I mean, purpose is really important, but along with that, what you want to understand is is this idea desirable? The pain point that you're solving, is it big and material? Do enough people, enough organizations feel that pain and feel it acutely, right? One of the big mistakes we all tend to do, and I've done it, is, you go and sort of try and solve the problem which is big for you, right? I mean, I did my fashion tech because I hate going to shops. So I said, wouldn't it be great to buy clothes like X, Y, and Z? Turns out, a lot of people like going to, shops and shopping for clothes, right? So I was trying to solve the wrong problem. So that is really critical, is finding a problem that is big and acute. The second thing is feasibility. Can you technically and operationally build and scale the service? One of the biggest problems we have as engineers is we get seduced by problems that have tough or difficult technical solution, right? More than the problem, we care about the technical solution. And it's great to make an initial prototype or an MVP, but then building and scaling it operationally ends up becoming a nightmare. And you really need to think, is it ready to be scaled? The third thing is viability. Look, if you can't make money, if you can't win in that field, then don't go on that, right? I mean, there's a difference between charity and sort of a startup, which you need to scale, and you need to earn money to pay your own employees, right? Forget about making a unicorn and all those things, right? But you need to pay your staff, and you're not going to get the best talent if you can't do that. So you really have to think about the business model. More often than not, we again get seduced by what we see on internet. Overnight somebody becomes so big, but they have no clue about their business model. It doesn't work like that. B2C businesses are really, really expensive when it comes to customer acquisition. B2B businesses unless you do it correctly, if you end up in a business where it takes 1.5 years to make a sale of $5,000, you're dead, right? So those are the three lenses. So before going on the journey, it's important to look at the desirability, feasibility, and viability. The final point, which I think is very important for all of us, and it's more from a personal level, is do you really want to do startup at this point of your life? Can you afford it? It's a question we don't ask often. All of us have different personal situations. I can't tell you the number of times people come to me and say, I have this amazing, cool idea. And then you start talking to them. Turns out, it's a family of 4. The person is a single earner. Kids are going to private schools. There's a huge mortgage, and they still want to do startup, right? And you say, boss, this thing is going to take 5 to 7 years to become something, and the risk of failure is high. Can you afford that? And you know what? You have to be honest. And sometimes saying now is not the time is not such a bad thing to say.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Amit, for being so candid, actually. And completely agree. Desirability and viability are like 2 of the key parameters which a lot of founders kind of miss and get so quagmired in the technology part of it. And your last point as well, right, about the idea might be good, but can you do it now? So that was really good to know. So let's change gears now and dive into the context of Industry 4.0 and elaborate on more for our audience. So I would start again with you, Amit, if that is okay. Can you help us define what Industry 4.0 is all about? And then more importantly, why do you think CXOs and business leaders from high tech, from manufacturing or energy and utilities industry should care about it?
It's a good question, right? And I'll try and answer this in sort of a very simple way. For me, at the simplest level, Industry 4.0 is all about connecting the physical assets to the cyber world. And when I say physical assets, I always think of the 3 M's. It's material, machine, and men. I mean, it's men and women, but, just for sake of remembering it, I always say material, machines, and men. So these are your assets. You need to connect them to the cyber world so that you can fundamentally increase productivity, improve safety, and cut costs. And there are 3 sort of key aspects as you think about Industry 4.0 and what this connectivity can do. The base level is, what we call sensing. You should be able to sense what's happening in the field. You should be able to know the heart rate of your employee if you are in a mining industry, the temperature of the engine, the electricity which is flowing, the amount of material which is mined, whatever, right? So that's the base level sense. Then once you have the data coming in, you need to infer and get some insights out of it. So it's very easy now to figure out what is the temperature of a big engine. Is it good, bad? Something bad is about to happen. Like, what's the point of collecting that information? That is the hard bit, right? So then you have to build this data engine, which can infer some insights out of it. And maybe the insight is this engine is about to explode and catch fire, right? And that's a very important sort of insight. But the third level, which is the most important, without which Industry 4.0 sort of doesn't work, is the action. What are you going to do on the basis of insight, and how are you going to affect that action in the field? So if we take that very simple example, this engine is about to blow, you have an option. Ideally, there is a mechanic somewhere who can very quickly reach there, shut down the engine or fix it. Or, and more this is happening, is you start moving towards autonomy, right? Where the system itself shuts down that engine, takes it out, maybe even repairs it and brings it back in, right? So those are the 3 levels. But at the end, it's all about making your assets, men, material, and machine, smarter by connecting it to the cyber world. Now, in terms of your second part of the question, why is it important? I think it's table stakes. It's a bit almost like saying, why is it important for us to adopt email or phone, right? I mean, you cannot run an industrial business if you don't have connected assets, if you don't have smart assets, right? You just have to do that. And if you don't do that, you are going to fall way behind and get pushed out by companies who adopt, right? I mean, car is a physical asset. And we have seen, companies like Tesla, which have managed to connect a car to the internet. I mean, we all know what is the valuation of Tesla as compared to all those companies, right? So it's an imperative. You have to do it. The question is, how soon can you do it? How well you can do it? But, should I or should I not? It's not a question anybody should be asking.
Got you. So it's no longer optional, right? Irrespective of the industry you are from, it is out there. It is a kind of a survival question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So thanks for laying that out. Some of the building blocks of Industry 4.0. So Kapil, what is your take? So you work for a lot in the field of with field workers, right? As you said in the beginning, and your work revolves around data, collection of data, and making the lives of all those field workers more safer, and they can be more productive. So what in your view is has changed in last few years, which has led to this whole revolution of Industry 4.0? What was not there, let us say, 10 years ago? Because as we know, right, automation was always there, robots were always there, devices were always there. You mentioned that in even video, the smartphone is around for almost 15 years now. So can you shed some light on what in your experience has changed in last 5 to 10 years, which has led to this acceleration of adoption of Industry 4.0?
Good. I'm going to agree with Amit, right? It's an imperative. I like the three M's, Amit. So the human, I'll make it gender neutral. The human is becoming more essential. And we saw that through COVID, right? Why? Because you still need to put the minds together along with the machines and the data to kind of get the outcomes. In this case, get a vaccination out in 9 months, right? So you don't want to have an underprepared organization for the next time. So that's one big driver. People realize that things can go wrong, and if you're not prepared, you won't be able to respond to it. That's just a natural human response, and I think every organization, every CXO has now realized that. The other two big vectors which is driving this movement is, the industries that we work in, largely take utilities, energy, manufacturing, agri. There's a lot of regulation coming, which means there's a lot of price controls, which means the customers will benefit. But then that means you have to deliver on time, on budget, safely, with the same set of resources, right? So you can't fundamentally deliver that. It's an impossible problem to solve unless you improve productivity, right? And the only way you improve productivity is by enabling better tools for the humans out there and investing more in the IoT and the other cloud infrastructure that allows you to do that. The piece that I think the penny has dropped for everybody, that the enabling tool is data. And I think Amit also mentioned insight and intelligence that comes out of it, right? If you are not focusing on your people, your process, your machines, and your data, I think if I were to add one to the 3M, it's going to be 3M plus data, right? So 3M plus 3D effectively. So you can if you start to focus on that, you will see that you can actually make productivity happen, right? And video is a great example. We can talk together, we can save visits, we can improve time performance, right? It's data effectively. You take it to the next level if you add insight to that data. And I think that's what we are seeing. So the change drivers really are pricing, the price controls, the regulation. The second big change lever is infrastructure, right? So everybody's building 5G, fiber, green energy, sustainability. So if I combine sustainability and infrastructure, those are the big vectors out there. Now, again, you want to deliver more. Somebody's willing to pump more money. I think $1.9 trillion in the US, $250 billion here. Where will you do it? How will you do it? People are not ready. You don't have enough skill sets. You don't have enough capabilities. And then if you do a shabby job, you have all the issues that Amit said, right? You have quality going down, safety going down. So I think the vectors are right here. And I don't think anybody is an option. You've got to go green by 2030. You've got to go green by 2030, right?
That's right.
And that means I have to deliver 20 projects until last year, and I have to deliver 40 with the same resource price. So you've got to look for what I call newer tools for today. The tools of yesterday will not work.
That's right. No, makes sense. So essentially, what Amit Kapil you have described. So there is an innovation happening outside of traditional manufacturing industries, right? So like 5G or cloud, these were not part of the manufacturing ecosystem a few years ago. So there is an external innovation on 5G, cloud, machine learning, computing, which is kind of proliferating in the manufacturing industry and laying a foundation for manufacturers to kind of use. So I would like to draw only you in the conversation and hear from you. So, like, do you think that traditionally we had like field operators, so people who are working on shop floor, so there was a significant reliance on their experience, right? A person is working on a shop floor for a number of years, which means that he or she has seen a number of breakdowns and emergencies, and there is a kind of a lot of tacit knowledge in that person's head. So now with all the technology coming in, the data, mobile apps, predictive analytics, so are they kind of replacing that knowledge worker, that experienced veteran on the shop floor or in the manufacturing unit, or are these technologies kind of complementing him or her, or kind of like better preparing them to tackle all the uncertainties only?
So my view is it is complementary. Depending on the type of industry you work, technology cannot replace almost everything that people do in the fields that they work, but it's definitely complementary. And I'd like to actually relate more to the domain that I have worked, which is the agri space. So
Right.
if you look at the agri space, you will find that you have almost anywhere between 30 to 90% of agricultural produce being done by small farmers, depending on the type of industry that you are in. And when both Amit and Kapil mentioned about productivity improvement in efficiencies, now this is a sector where you see productivity and efficiency at the very lowest, simply because that's the kind of industry that they work in. And so one of the ways technology can work is, how do we enable, this is a good part of the work that we do in my company Dibis, is how do we connect millions of small farmers or small and medium industry players who are part of a supply chain. And so I just want to shift a little bit from what both Amit and Kapil were trying to say about improving efficiencies within organizations and the roles that people play within organizations. I just want to shift a bit to say the kind of role that we are looking at is, when you look at a connected supply chain, and supply chains are connected, then you realize that you need to have a technology framework that enables every stakeholder in the supply chain to benefit in some way. And yet, the sum total of all of that work kind of brings about a total improvement in the system that we are talking about. So I personally think that while definitely all of the kind of improvements that Industry 4.0 enables for people at different parts of the supply chain, the way we look at it is, how do we bring the sector or that last mile connectivity, which is kind of missing in many ways, how do we bring them up? Because just to give you some very quick numbers, when you talk about an oil crop like palm, you could potentially get something like 6 tons of oil per hectare. But at the lowest end, small farmers are producing just 1 or 2 tons of oil equivalent per hectare. Now that has got impact on the overall industry in terms of sustainability as well, because you have limited land, you don't want to encroach on forests. How do you bring everybody to a certain level of efficiency? How can technology help to connect? So the space in which we are trying to work is, how do we use technology to build collaboration between supply chain stakeholders? And of course, all of the improvements that work from an Industry 4.0 standpoint in each and every silo of that supply chain is very valuable. You can still connect that. But that's my perspective, that It's not just you cannot treat it in silence.
Agree. No, agree. Completely agree, Udni. And I think your point around looking at the whole value stream, from upstream supply chain to shop floors to the downstream supply chain, is a valid one. And we have a very interesting audience question here, Kapil and Amit, to your previous point that these technologies, on one hand, are like driving productivity for the manufacturers, but then the question we have here is, all these sensors and smart devices and connected devices and all the entire cloud and backend data processing platforms, they actually put a lot of demand on energy, right? They're very energy intensive processes. So then how do companies, manufacturers balance between sustainability and productivity? So, Amit, Kapil,
maybe I can take that first, right? Because this is something we were working with on MachineMax for the last 3 years. I think the question is spot on, and there is a lot of energy being consumed by the tech industry itself, which is trying to help other industries cut down on emission, right? So there's a little bit of challenge there, but the scales are very, very, very different, right? So let me give you an example. Within MachineMax, our focus was on helping big yellow machines that you normally see on a construction site and mining site operate efficiently. One big number just to keep in back of mind is, on an average, a large construction machine idles for 40% of the time when it is switched on. Idling means that the engine is turned on, the machine is turned on, it's burning fuel, but it's not doing anything useful, right? 40% means, and just to get a sense, some of these large machines will burn through 5 liters of diesel for every hour it is on while idling, right? If you think about it, an average machine works for 2,500 hours a year. 1,000 hours is idling into 5 liters. It's 5,000 liters of diesel being burned per year per machine, and there are 50 million machines, right? So you can do the maths and see what is the impact of that. Now, the way we were solving that was we started giving these sort of small sensors, which I'm holding in my hand. It's a very small thing, and what you can do is, if there are 2 magnets, you just go stick it to it. This is battery powered, and the battery life is 2 years, right? Now, of course, there is a carbon footprint of this, right? It's plastic, there's like small batteries inside, but those batteries will last 2 years. I would definitely say, in this particular case, from a trade-off perspective, the benefit you can get versus what you're spending is worth it. But the point is well taken that there might be other circumstances where that trade-off might not happen. But in big industries, these are big machines, big supply chains, big material movement. The amount of impact you can have far, far surpasses the impact of these things.
Yeah,
Kapil, you want to add something to that?
No, definitely. So I think it's very easy to think that AI and ML and data is going to solve world hunger, right? That's what IoT. It doesn't happen that way. And yes, it's true that if you're trying to build a verticalized AI application, you need lots of data, lots of crunching power, so it'll have a carbon footprint. The view we have taken is it's anyways hard to solve lots of verticalized problems. Means mining will have a verticalized AI stack, energy will have a different one, construction will have a different one. And you will need to collect a lot of data, and it'll take a lot of compute power. The piece that the view we've taken is the human view, because they're still there. There's lots of intelligence that can be harnessed from the human, which doesn't require AI to be made. So if you can bring the human insight into the loop faster, you will see that you can actually reduce the computational requirements to solve a problem. Again, it comes back to outcomes, right? We're not applying AI because it's a great tool. AI has been around since the 60s. Most of the business outcomes can still today be solved with a reasonably good optimal balance of human and machines. And I think if you take that holistic view, you will be able to drive a lot better sustainable outcomes. And I have data for this. So through COVID, one of the UK regulated network operators, they were still deploying fiber in the UK, and with our remote video assurance technology, which is an asynchronous video, so you don't have to be a live video in the field, where installers are doing inspections and checks and working to deliver their sites. And instead of filling in a form, which was paper, they just use our app to do a small show and tell. So they'll show what they've done, how things have worked using video. Now we use AI to interpret the video and bring it to a very small team of experts who is now, reviewing and approving the works. The results have been amazing. Last 1 year, we've approved 1,000 sites, Amit and Nitin, and that would have taken at least 5,000 field visits. Now, UK is a small country, right? So 5,000 visits on an average 200 miles, you're looking at about almost 100,000 or miles of carbon fuel to be burned, right? No, actually 1 million, sorry. Now, if you take this to the global level, right, we've just saved all those visits because one, COVID, right? Two, it wasn't required because you get good visibility of the data. So you can craft, the combination of human, digital and AI technologies together to get better outcomes. Now, the carbon footprint of those 1 million visits is a lot more than any data that we have crunched, right? Exactly. So I think this is a bit of a misnomer that, yes, we're crunching data, doing other things, but to Udni's point, you've got to take a holistic view, right? That one small battery-powered thing has a carbon footprint, but you've saved 40% of idle time, right? So it all balances out from that perspective. The human intelligence piece is important, and to recognize that AI only solves very verticalized problems. It should be deep enough and compelling enough from a business perspective for you to solve it, right? We get customers who come and say, hey, can you just do this? Because computer vision will just make this happen easily. Like, no, it's still being inspected by a human being. Why do you need computer vision? The guy's kind of telling you it's there or not. If you can't send a person, then let's see if you can put a camera in, right? So I think those business choices still drive the technology selection on where you will put the AI in the stack or not, or cloud, so I think the trade-off will still balance out in favor of technology helping, because sustainability goals will enable that. And the more we kind of start to assure things on that level, the better it gets. So that's kind of a slightly human viewpoint to this.
No, I think that makes sense. And I think the kind of conclusion I'm drawing is that, don't use AI and ML just because it is trendy, and try to solve a problem which can be solved by common sense or maybe a lot simpler technologies. That's one. And secondly, what three of you have said, that, the return on investments, even from a reduction in carbon footprint, is not high in a lot of use cases. So yeah, on one hand, there is an energy consumption. Compute requires energy, but then the savings are not significant. So worth taking that plunge and like you're investing in these sustainable technologies. So makes sense. Thanks, Kapil and Amit. Undi, I'm keen to hear from you now. So your startup DBiz actually, so you have picked up another piece of technology in say manufacturing industry, which is blockchain, right? So blockchain as a concept is not very old. It's been around for maybe 10, 15 years. I'm not sure. I'll let you give a bit of a history. But then essentially the question is that, do you think that blockchain also, like Amit or Kapil mentioned, like the application of AI and ML, is blockchain actually solving a problem in supply chains, whether it's an upstream or a downstream supply chain in manufacturing industry, or is blockchain right now in too nascent and early stages for a large scale adoption?
Yeah, so, we hear a lot about blockchain, but in domains different from its application to supply chains. Where our company has deployed blockchain is, it's actually not a solution in itself. When you talk about supply chain and blockchain applied to supply chain. In our case, what we have done is, because a supply chain involves so many connected supply chain partners, we have built a digital transformation solution that enables all of these stakeholders to be connected and do the same supply chain work they do, from standard purchase order to invoicing to delivery orders and certifications. But when you look at how all of these transactions, particularly with the COVID era, where people have not been able to really get to work, even supply chain people involved, are using our cloud-based platform, are able to do all of those transactions exactly the way they have been doing, but in a complete digitized form. Now, where our platform is different and the role of blockchain comes in is because you have multiple levels of transactions at different levels within the supply chain, you need a certain level of authenticity to that data. And so the blockchain role is basically in terms of providing that immutable data. Because in the agri-business, and for that matter, any supply chain, as our platform is industry agnostic, what we are trying to build is a sustainability authentication system where all of the data that is actually transacted in a supply chain, that data is now put on a blockchain and it is immutable. So to give very specific example, in the agri-business, look at the palm industry. Now, when, say a company like Unilever buys raw material for production of soaps, now they would like to know that this is sustainably sourced. So there is this whole ethical procurement system that is required. And today, most of that is available by way of inferred evidence and happens at the end of the month as some kind of reconciliation. Now, what we are doing is to actually provide that on a real-time basis, connecting everybody from the very first mile, which involves millions of smallholders who were not connected at all, but all of that data gets onto the blockchain. So at the end of the day, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or any time, you are able to retrieve that data and you have sustainability certification authentication, you have real-time data, you have geospatial analytics, you have inventory as it exists at the various nodes of the supply chain. So I would say blockchain per se itself is not a solution by itself in the application that we have developed.
No, I think this makes a lot of sense because in the mainstream, one of the biggest use cases of blockchain we hear almost every day is crypto. And obviously, it kind of divides the world into two halves. So it's very difficult for people to correlate blockchain with sustainability. So thanks for explaining that, Udi, that how blockchain can help bring more transparency in the value streams and drive sustainability. We have one more interesting question, Amit, Kapil, actually, to one of the previous points you have made about, investments in technology is an imperative in Industry 4.0, and it's not optional. So the audience question links sustainability again, right? So the question is that in emerging markets or in traditional industries like, agriculture, so if companies or the government invests in these technologies, will sustainability take a backseat? Because you are driving productivity in manufacturing, oil and gas, or farming by using all of these technologies. So will it affect sustainability just because now you are able to draw maybe more coal faster from a mine, right? Or you're able to draw oil much more faster. So historically, an oil well, which might run for 50 years, might only get dried in 20 years now. So what's your take on it? I think it's a very interesting question.
Happy to go first again on this. I think we have to be very careful about sort of productivity and what sustainability is, right? I mean, there are two aspects. One is on the demand side. So let's take coal as an example. Do you really need coal? Can we live without coal, right? Industry 4.0 is not answering that question, right? Industry 4.0 is answering the question, given a particular demand for coal, can we extract it in a sustainable fashion? Right. And if you sit in a mine, short of shutting down the mine, you can't really do anything, right? And and if you want to sort of bring emissions down to zero. So I think we have to keep those two questions separate, right? There is this whole electrification drive going on, right? And there is whole amount of work happening in trying to reduce the emissions impact of material, of energy consumption, right? So in construction, for example, concrete is a huge problem when it comes to emissions, right? And people are looking at alternative material, right? Electricity, we spoke about that. So that's a different problem. How can we change the demand patterns for more sustainable materials? And then there is the industry 4.0 conversation saying, given that there is a particular demand pattern, can we do the same thing in a much more sustainable way? And by the way, one of the things with sustainability is not just carbon emissions, right? I mean, there's whole kinds of other wastages which happens as well, you know, whether it's water and other things. And you can be a lot more you can be a lot better about that, right? You know, for example, sending waste into rivers and waters, you can manage it much better if you have connected centers, right? So that I would sort of encourage the person who's asked the question to think about it in that way. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. Makes sense.
Totally agree with Amit. I think sustainability is unquestionable. We have to build a greener, sustainable future for ourselves and for future generations. And to Amit's point, already you can see this year, I think Europe produced 50% of its energy from green energy. That's huge, right? That's not a small number. And we work with a lot of energy companies who are making that transition now. So they've not been given an option from investors, from the government. So it's there to stay. And I totally echo the point that Amit made, that you got to think of these two things differently. One drives productivity and can make things greener. The other is just a demand side response that we're all working to. I think our view at Intelligence is very simple. We all have to play a part. Governments, investors, industry, academia, even me, right? So if I'm using extra water, I'm kind of not doing anybody a favor. If I'm putting myself at risk by not wearing gloves when I'm doing something useful. So it's everybody's responsibility, and you need extreme collaboration. No different from the world came together to fight COVID, right? You just need to think of it that way. So if you want to make a sustainable world, you've got to do your part. And that's kind of how we see it. We can make a small difference. We can save carbon miles. We can save visits. We can save lives. We can make a safer environment. We can digitally upskill people. So there are lots of things you can do towards those 17 or 19 ESG goals, which kind of are sustainability development goals and provide better governance. So that's kind of just, I don't think I could add much to what Amit already said, but that's just the extra bits there.
No, I think that's the remarkable point, Kapil, that in sustainability is not just with regulators or industry, but it is everybody's responsibility. So I think let's switch gear now. So we've discussed about the building blocks of Industry 4.0, and then we briefly discussed about the correlation of technology and sustainability and how new technologies can drive sustainability. Let us now talk about adoption of all of these new technologies. A lot of refineries, manufacturing units, Kapil, in your experience, Amit, in your experience, are running for decades, right? They are not new, and they have very complex systems, machines, and intertwined. So are these legacy manufacturing units, shop floor, at a disadvantage because they will be a lot slower in adoption of technology? Or let me rephrase the question. Can all of these new technologies be retrofitted without throwing away all the old industries, the old factories, shutting them down or starting new? Can these be retrofitted in a brownfield plant, or do you need a complete greenfield approach to this technology adoption?
Yeah. So again, and I've worked a lot with construction companies, mining companies. I've been to refineries, and if you go to a mining site, an average mining site would have started 60 years ago, right? Some of the large construction projects, infrastructure construction projects go on for 20 odd years, right? In UK, we tend to take even more time, as we know, with, Crossrail and HS2, like things never finish, right? And what you can't do is you can't go there and say the next time you open a mine or the next time you do HS3, that's when you can adopt technology, right? So I don't think you can wait. Now, if you think about what are the challenges of adoption, and we go back to sort of those three layers of sensing, inferring, and acting, sensing is an easy problem. you don't need to go change the engine. You don't need to go change the machinery there, right? You don't need to change the human beings there. They are very low cost devices that you can stick and you can collect data. Data collection, and that is part of sensing because of increased 3G, 4G, 5G rates, all kinds of technologies you can collect it. So that I think is the easy bit. The harder bit then is inferring, right? For a plant that was built 60 years ago, now that I have all these data points on vibration, noise, electric consumption, temperature, moisture, humidity, what does it mean? What can I do with it? Starts to become harder. As Kapil mentioned, that's when you need to build that sort of verticalized AI stack and that verticalized knowledge. That is hard, and these guys need to invest. But I would still say the biggest challenge is the next step, which is acting on it. What you don't have is you're not going to have autonomous supply chains or autonomous machines which can change their behavior. That's not the case. So going back again a bit to Kapil's point is you have the humans involved in the middle, and you need to retrain and change the behavior of the humans to then use these insights to behave differently. And because these industries are the way they are, an average person has been doing the same thing for 40 years, trying to tell them to use the insight to behave differently sometimes is the biggest problem. So back to your question, it can be done. It has to be done. We can't wait for 60 years to make the changes, but the challenges are more on the insight and definitely on the behavior change aspect of it.
Totally. And I'll just add one concrete example. So we're working with energy companies who have plants which have been running for many years, and the current processes require them to put data on paper, right? And they're all experts in their own rights. But when you give them a tool to say, you're not going to do a safety observation on paper anymore, you just show a camera, do a short video, and that's it. That didn't require a lot of change. But as we collected the data and we kind of started to draw the insight back to say, by the way, you missed this part, or this was a better insight from you. Suddenly you see adoption go through the roof, right? And we got about 70-75% adoption in the first 3 to 6 months, which is a very high adoption rate when you look at a very old industry, not old plant, right? Where people don't change. Second example is a water company in the UK. We, during COVID, asked customers to report leaks using short videos rather than calling a contact center. Now, can you imagine, expecting a person in the north of England to say, you got to get this SMS, you got to just give me a short video and show me where the leak is. That's it. You don't have to call the contact center. 62% people opted to do that. So the shift is also coming from within. So I'm giving one example from consumer and one from a very sophisticated thermal power plant. The human is the same. If you can give them tools which are easy to use and let the intelligence somehow siphon out of that gate into the management, into the right people, you've made a huge step forward, right? And I think that's those are the two examples I can give you straight from what we've been experiencing. And so you got to retrofit and you got to do new. I don't think there's it's an and, it's not an or answer. Unni, what's your take?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I can give examples of how this is working in very traditional industries like agri. When you look at small farmers, most of them have worked their entire life in a certain way. And for them, there is absolutely no visibility. When they sell a crop, they don't even get to know what was the real quality assessment of that crop when it reached the mill, or what was the pricing that they should have got for that crop, or what is really happening in terms of even logistics for delivery of that particular crop into the market through traditional channels. Sometimes they go through middlemen. So our experience is we developed a mobile app where this entire thing that they were doing manually, now they are able to do it through that mobile app, and they get instant feedback as to what is their own assessment of crop quality, what is the feedback from the mill or the dealer, how long does it take before their crop reaches a certain place, what should have been the price that they should get. So all of a sudden, and I totally agree with both Amit and Kapil, one area where productivity improves and efficiency improves is by sheer visibility. Now, this end of a supply chain did not have any real-time visibility. And now, all of a sudden, they are getting instant feedback. Oh, my crop reached at such and such time. Here is the weighbridge slip. It's digitally coming on his mobile phone. He sees that his FFB quality, as we call it, fresh fruit, is indeed not very far from what he was being paid for. So I think it is an interaction between technology and the human being, but technology just enables it to be made more efficient, and it helps everybody in the supply chain, so to speak.
That makes sense. Undi. So I think we had a very interesting discussion. We have come to the top of the hour. So probably last comments from each of the panelists. Amit, so any advice you have for budding entrepreneurs or students who want to pursue their career in Industry 4.0 very quickly? And we start Amit, Kapil, and Undi. You're on mute, Amit, sorry.
I had to do that before the end of the hour, right? Fresh. But no, the first thing I would say is like Industry 4.0 is huge. I mean, the sort of industries we are talking about, agricultural, construction, mining, manufacturing, logistics, transportation, these are massive, massive parts of the industry of the global GDP. First thing I would say is like, go take interest in these areas, right? World does not need yet another food delivery app or a taxi app, right? There's enough of them. There are real problems. It impacts real human lives, right? Go build that. But to do that, you would have to have interest in it and find a way of sort of experiencing it for the first hand, right? I mean, I would say that's probably the biggest advice is like, get more involved, learn a lot more about these industries, and the opportunities there, I bet you today, are much bigger than what you see in the consumer space. But be very, very honest to yourself. It's going to take 5 to 7 years minimum. There's a high chance of failure. Be sure, right? There is no overnight success here. Yeah.
Thanks, Amit. Kapil, last words.
Only thing I can say is the sooner you get into this, the better it is. The later in life you try to do it, to Amit's point, you have more liabilities and the risk appetite goes down. So
it never gets better. You keep on thinking next year would be easier, and it will become harder and harder.
So if you have a strong purpose and a belief, you think you make a difference, go for it. I think there's nothing else that I can say.
Undi?
I'd just like to add by saying that, I mean, the millennials today, they are anyway very convinced about how their world needs to change. And therefore, there is a lot of passion in them to make a difference. And they are willing to pay more for sustainable products. They want to do the right things in life. And this space that we are looking at, B2B, really offers so much opportunity for everybody involved, particularly young people. And there are so many areas that they can, get involved with to make a difference. And really speaking, for them, it is not just going to be building new things, but they're going to enjoy it because it's something they're passionate about in terms of creating a new world and a more sustainable world. And I hope that, whatever little work we are doing is going to be in some way, some inspiration to almost everybody.
No, certainly, I'm sure this conversation will inspire a lot of people out there. So, gentlemen, thank you so much. I really wish we had more time, but this discussion has been absolutely amazing and very insightful personally for me. So I would like to thank you for your time today and from your busy schedules and sharing your point of view on a Friday afternoon. So thank you so much for joining us, Amit, Kapil, and Undi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Absolutely loved hearing from the panel.